Hello, and welcome back to another video. Today, I want to show you something that I made for Tabletop Obscura a little while back, and that I think everyone, or well, maybe not everyone, but I think a lot of people will like, called Environmental Dangers. Uh, I would go into a brief synopsis, but it actually gets into that in of itself pretty quickly. You can find a link to the PDF, images, and transcript of this document below. It is on my Patreon, but my Patreon is 100% free. If you would like to support me, you can, but it is not mandatory by any means. So thank you for being here with me, and thank you for following along. And let's get started. Environmental dangers. Throwing a foe through a closed window, falling into a picket fence, or being flung into an actively bubbling alchemy lab, or having a chandelier dropped on your head. Environmental dangers can be all over and generally require active influence from the world to come into play. While some can be written as hazards, the true power of this guide is the ability to quickly improvise additional damage or effects from clever uses of the environment by player and GM alike. We have a table here, which we will get to later, but we immediately go to underlying guides. Environmental dangers should always be described to the players to prompt them to use their environment. They might be visuals on a map or described in theater of the mind. The exception being things that are not at all obvious to begin with, such as hazards that haven't been noticed. And this is hazards in the sense of the word, unless the mechanical sense that we have in 2e. It's less fun for the players if all the dangers are secret or only available for their enemies to use first, but using this now and again, peppering such things here and there, can be interesting. Environmental dangers should be used sparingly with the subject when the subject is already dangerous, such as a trap or hazardous terrain. Dropping someone onto a bear trap shouldn't deal extra damage as environmental danger, since they're already taking falling damage and being subject to the trap. Similar with dropping them onto hazardous terrain, as they will already be taking damage because of the terrain. However, if the subject doesn't have a dedicated source of damage or effects, you can make them into an environmental danger. Danger levels. Much like any hazard, dangers have levels, and you can use this level to help determine how much damage or what kind of effects the danger cause, or determine the level of a danger by the damage instead if you're improvising. Dangers do not generally affect the XP budget of an encounter, though if they are heavily beneficial to the party's foes, secret, or otherwise more of a challenge than a tool for either party, they should provide the same XP as a simple hazard of their level. Similarly, if they only or primarily benefit the party and do not require creative use, you may increase the overall XP budget of the encounter by the same amount, effectively taking XP away from inset enemies. Table A1, danger damage, provides guidance on how much damage a danger should cause, varied between if it is single-use or multi-use danger. You can use the dice given or generate your own expression based on the damage in parentheses. Using environmental dangers. Environmental dangers are there to help you make the environment more dynamic without hampering the speed of an encounter. In most instances, environmental dangers do not offer a save and are an additional effect applied to the circumstances that enable them. For example, a creature pushed through a closed window might shatter the glass, dealing slashing damage to the creature passing through. Some dangers only make sense to use once, such as a busted glass window. But you may create a multi-use dangers, a bed of shattered glass on the ground, for example, which should often be of a lower level. You can derive them from a single use, if it's appropriate. To utilize an environmental danger, a character must do something to utilize it, usually by shoving a creature into the danger, though sometimes tripping them or otherwise forcing them to interact with it via similar actions or activities are available, and encouraged at GM discretion. The creature being forced to interact with the danger is the one that takes damage. Some damage might cause additional effects or conditions. Those should deal damage as if they were 2 levels lower, or do no damage at all, depending on the severity of the effect. If a DC is required, use the standard DC for the dangerous level, which can then be modified for difficulty as normal. So that's +2 for hard, -2 for easy, +5 for incredibly hard, and -5 for incredibly easy, as is appropriate for your particular danger. we'll come back to example dangers after the table and the sidebar here. Arbitrating dangers. Sometimes unusual circumstances will arise when you even have pre-planned dangers. If your players think of interesting ways to enable a danger, consider its veracity even if it isn't something you listed. Dangers can be very freeform and are narratively driven from the surroundings. Feel free to implement or regress additional ways to enable dangers or even to depreciate a danger that is overutilized, such as running out of corrosive fluids from spilled acid or embedding all the dangerous shards of glass into a creature's body. Sometimes players may seek to disable a danger. Treat this similarly to disabling a hazard, using a sensible skill, utility, or spell to allow a danger to be neutralized, using a DC appropriate to its level if necessary. But if somebody wants to use hydraulic push to put out some searing hot coals that have been spilled across the ground, let them. This is all about creative use. So creative use of your environment includes creative use of disabling the environment. So let's go check out the table right quick. We have table A1, danger damage. I'm not going to go through every single number here, but you can see it on screen and you can check the link below for the transcript or the PDF or the images so that you can have a better look at them over a longer period of time. But we have them from level -1 to level 24, like most creatures. And it only applies to a single thing here on the multi-use damage, but if there's a penalty to it, the damage cannot be reduced below 1. So 2d4 minus 2, minimum 1, effectively. And I spent a lot of time looking at both creature and hazard damage to try and come up with the damages here. They are much shallower than creature and hazard damage in general, especially the multi-use ones. And that is to keep them from becoming too powerful in terms of their utilization. They are a ribbon, a memorable piece of creative use of the environment, as opposed to a more impressive hazard that might get used in combat. This is to help them remain as XP neutral as possible. And remember that your creatures can use dangers just as much as your players. They require an active involvement from parties on either side, with the exception of maybe the ones that require you to fall on them, in which case it could be passive in some sense. So let's go to our examples. Example dangers. Dangers can be quickly written up if you want to have them on hand long term for common or recurring dangers, or just as part of planning a special encounter. Below are some examples arranged by level. We have Shattered Glass, which is a danger, is level -1, and is enabled by the creature being forced into the glass's space without foot protection or falling prone in its space. Multi-use. Damage, 1 slashing. Very simple. A Glass Window, danger, level 0, forced through the window space, single use, damage, 1d6 slashing. A Chemist's Slab, which has the acid trait in addition, is level 2 and is enabled by forcing a creature into the lab space or being forced prone on the lab space. It is single use and deals 2d6 acid. You might also take down and have a level 0 version of this that is multi-use. For after the chemicals have spilled, you can bang out a 1 to 2 damage out of them every round or two by forcing them back into the acid. And you could also swap this with fire or electricity based on the alchemical items that were being created. Silver Chandelier. I made this one to show that you can implement special materials for set piece encounters. So say you're fighting a devil in a ballroom, you might be able to drop this silver chandelier on them for damage that isn't reduced by their reduction of physical damage. It's enabled by cutting the rope holding the chandelier up, causing it to fall in a 5-foot burst, and it's single use. So I wanted to show that this one can show that they cover more area than normal. And okay, it's supposed to be single use, not synergy use, but I'm sure you'll be able to pick that up. Stained glass cathedral windows, a bigger, batter window, level 6, enabled force through the window space, and deals 46 slashing damage. It's otherwise just a bigger, batter version of the glass window. A massive spire, like you might see an obelisk in a graveyard, or those super pointy roofs on the tops of some towers. Maybe you're fighting in the sky or on a higher point of a building and push somebody into the space. As they fall into the spire space to enable it, it is multi-use, unless you decide to break the spire, which is one of the things you could depreciate. It deals 2d6 piercing damage, and falling damage becomes piercing instead of bludgeoning. So it'll also stack any falling damage they take. And the creature is immobilized with a DC of 24 to escape their impalement. A Stasian reactor. It's level 10 and has the electricity trait. To be enabled, you are forced into the reactor's coils, and this is multi-use, and it deals 3d6 electricity damage. Pretty straightforward, but most of these are not complicated. The more complicated ones here are just to set examples and show you some things that are possible and potentially intended to get your mind going for your own. Accursed Tombstones, Danger, Magical, Unholy, and Void. It's level 12. Enabled by forced into the tombstone space or into an adjacent open grave, single use. 5d8 void damage, after which the tombstone cracks. Putrefact Detritus is level 14, and it's enabled by forcing a creature into the detritus' space. It's multi-use, deals 2d10 poison damage, and makes you sickened 1 with a DC of 32. As you can see, these don't have very robust stat blocks. They're simple, to the point, and they're mostly just a note, so that you don't have to completely wing it every time. But you can use the table if somebody comes up with something you didn't think of. If somebody wants to drop the loft, the second floor of the tavern on top of an enemy, you can improvise using this. An Unstable Mana Rift is a danger that is magical and has the teleportation trait. Level 16, forced into the rift space. Most of them are going to be that, where you're just forced into its space, and it's single use. Deals 4d12 force damage, and on a failed DC 35 fortitude save, the creature is also forcibly teleported to a random unoccupied space within 30 feet, and then the rift collapses on itself. A Glacial Chasm is cold, danger, and environmental. Level 18, and you're forced into the chasm space. 2d6 slashing and 2d6 cold as the creature falls 10 feet and takes 1d4 slashing and 1d4 cold damage every time they make a climb check until they exit the chasm. Because it's like very sharp, razor-like pieces of ice. And our last one here is Planar Gate's Edge, level 20. Enable. Forced into the edge of a portal from a perpendicular angle, multi-use. Damage is 3d10 force damage. The creature does not go through the portal. If it is reduced to 0 hit points, its body is utterly destroyed and scattered across the multiverse. This is a death effect. So those are all the examples, and I hope that they give you some idea of how you could use these. Let me know in the comments below if you like this idea. If you want to see more things from me, check out my Patreon. There are several other things that I've worked on that are absolutely free that you can go check out down there. And well, thank you for watching. See you next time.